Thanks so much, Haley. I hope everyone can hear me there. Yeah, I want to start off by just really thanking Eco Canada and Ocean Alliance Canada for driving this research and making sure that we can discover these insights and really strengthen the blue economy in Canada. So as Haley said, my name is Dan Carpenter. I'm currently the Director of Employer Relations at the Ottawa Education Group. We are a full service education and training company located out of Ottawa, but we work Canada-wide. I like to say we work in the entire suite of the learning ecosystem, where we do everything from co-ops for schools to corporate training to VR and AI training development. But why I'm here today doing this is because most of us here at the Ottawa Education Group have worked or are have a lot of expertise in labor market economics, or we're university executives, so we're very strong in our research capacity, and so we've worked really hard with ECO and OAC to sort of really drive these insights and find out what we can do to strengthen the blue economy in Canada. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about growth gaps and opportunities, and then I will say on a personal note that this is a passion area of mine. I've spent the last 5 years in innovation and technology research, particularly looking at the blue economy, innovations and technologies within the blue economy. And before that, I worked in I guess you could say, education side of the blue economy as well at the Huntsman Marine Science Center in St. Andrews, New Brunswick as an interpreter there. And I don't know how much street cred in the blue economy this gets me, but I spent 2 weeks on a lobster boat in the Bay of Fundy doing some lobster fishing, which was the experience of a lifetime. Got caught in a nor'easter, which is a story for another day, but this is an area that I'm very personally interested in. And we're going to talk a little bit today about like research at the global level, at the international level, the global level, the domestic level. We'll be looking at some labor market data. We'll be doing some comparisons. And then we're really going to focus in on where Canada stands, how workers can transition into the blue economy or where those pathways exist, and then how we can grow the blue economy more sustainably. And bear with me on my slides. They're going to move a little slowly, I think. All right, so the agenda for today, I kind of just mentioned this, but it's really around, we'll start off looking at blue economy trends globally and domestically. We'll talk more about the workforce, and then we're going to go into the future here a little bit. So let's start off with the trends. And I think, yeah, before we get started in these, actually, we're going to just do a quick poll here on the audience. So Haley, is it possible that we can get the poll up?
Sorry, we'll have to skip this poll.
Okay, no worries. We'll skip this poll. We've got a couple more polls later on. I was interested in what parts of the blue economy the participants on this call work in or are most closely aligned with. It'd be great to still get some of those insights. So feel free to send that into the chat. We can take a look at that after. But yeah, let us know where you're coming in from, and we'll talk a little bit about that right now. So this is a look at the global blue economy and the output that exists in the different sectors of the blue economy. So you can see here that really where still a lot of the economic activity happening in the blue economy is in offshore oil and gas extraction, makes up 38%. But followed closely behind is marine and coastal tourism, which makes a lot of sense. If you think of global tourism, a lot of it is concentrated within the coasts. If you think of anywhere from Southeast Asia to California, Hawaii, even Alaska, Goa, the Caribbean, so much of global tourism is really driven by marine sector and marine areas. So together, those two areas globally, offshore oil and gas and marine and coastal tourism, make up 74% of the blue economy, so almost 3/4, which is a huge portion. If you think of the global blue economy, I mean, it's really driven by those two areas still right now. In terms of growth, the sector has seen quite steady growth over the last 30 years. You can see here it's still largely anchored in what we could say are legacy sectors or more traditional sectors, but many areas are innovation and technology are growing quite quickly. So in that time period, since 1995, the blue economy was made up about $1.3 trillion of global output, and today we're looking at 2.6 trillion. Which is matched or slightly exceeded overall economic growth, depending on what metrics you want to use. But really, it's kept pace with global economic growth or slightly exceeded. So it's an opportunity. It has been an opportunity area over the last 30 years. And then what's interesting here, you'll see offshore wind and marine renewables. It says 0%. That's not quite true. It's a small number, so it's rounded to 0%. But since over the last 20 years, we've actually seen a fourfold increase in that sector. So it's a very small number, times 4 to still a small number, but we'll see that it's expected to grow quite a bit. I should add a little note here that this is the most recent data we could find for all of these sectors, which is 2020 data. So there might be slight changes over the last 5 years, but really nothing, we don't believe anything significantly major in that time. But we can see the OECD estimates here about what the expectations are over the next 20 years or 30 years. Where what's interesting and was kind of shocking to us, I would say, is that just how big the offshore oil and gas extraction and offshore industry is still expected to grow up to 2050. You can see there in that first chart that there's expectations of continual growth of, up to 2050, quite heavy continual growth, over 3 times where we're currently at. And this, when you look at the data though, this isn't too surprising considering how much development is happening still and how much opportunity is seen here in the developing world. If any of you have paid attention to the news in this area, Guyana has had huge economic success in this regard in developing their offshore oil and gas. Their GDP per capita has skyrocketed, which in turn, can drive other countries to see that and want to develop in their exclusive economic zones as well, just seeing how successful, small countries can be in doing that. You also see that in Sao Tome, in other areas of the global south that see this still as a large opportunity for economic growth. So that is still a sector that the OECD believes will continue to grow. And these numbers here are not destiny. There may be major changes that actually slow down that rate of growth, but based on current estimates, this is sort of the expectation. But you can see that there's no sector here that's really expected to decline in any way. The entire ocean sector is really expected to continue to grow, and over this period another doubling is expected. So I talked about over the last 30 years there's been a doubling. There's an expectation of another doubling over the next 30 years. So what's great to see though from a climate and ecosystem perspective is that last part of the chart there, offshore wind and marine renewables. You can see there's not a ton of growth expected up to 2040. I mean, it is a lot of growth if you look at it in raw numbers, but compared to the other industries, it's still quite low. But then massive explosive growth is expected between 2040 and 2050 in this area, and that's largely driven by technological advancements and the fact that a lot of investments that are happening now or will likely be happening over the next 10 to 20 years will really come to fruition in that time period, and we'll see massive amounts of, or expected to see massive amounts of offshore wind and marine renewables really come online and drive the energy sector. So great to see. It's a little bit shadowed by how big oil and gas extraction is expected, but it's huge opportunities in offshore wind and marine renewables. So great to see. Oh, and I think I forgot to change that slide. So you'll see that here, my apologies. So top slide there, offshore oil and gas, and then bottom slide there, offshore and marine, offshore wind and marine renewables, my apologies. So that, and you can see marine and coastal tourism expected to grow, transport and ports expected to grow, fishing, aquaculture, fish processing. And these are global. This isn't for Canada, but you can see growth throughout all major industries of the blue economy here over the next 30 years. And emerging technologies. So if we look at the future of the blue economy based on that last chart, a lot of it is still expected to be driven by the energy sector, although more and more of that by marine renewables. But there's investments happening all across technologies. So everything from remote operated vehicles and drones, which are making data collection cheaper and more precise, seabed mapping, which is allowing for more exploration and easier and more advanced biodiversity assessments. We've got biotech really driving forward in this sector around healthcare and pharma development and genomic research. Desalination, we see investments and opportunities in that, especially in the Middle East, and which is great for Canada. It puts less pressure on us considering our freshwater resources and how in demand those could become with climate change. Wave and tidal energy expected to come online more and more. AI is really changing this sector quite significantly. It's improving forecasts. Data analysis is becoming more and more significant or advanced with AI. Digital twinning opportunities with that. And then CCUS, carbon dioxide removal, carbon capture, storage, et cetera, are really driving forward in this industry as well. And global forces reshaping the blue economy. So, if we look at if we look at each sector, there's several macro forces that are transforming all these sectors. Climate change, obviously, and the need for decarbonization. Geopolitical shifts. I'm sure everyone is noticing or feeling that right now. For Canada, that is especially true for our Arctic sovereignty, but defense spending and defense industry looks to be growing, and this current government obviously has talked a lot about driving investment in the defense sector. So that creates some marine and ocean opportunities and some risks, but the geopolitical situation globally is interesting in how that could transform the sectors. Digitalization, so like I said, AI, satellite monitoring, digital twinning, and then indigenous stewardship and co-governance, especially in Canada, but also in some areas of the Pacific, is driving changes in sectors as well, and part of the global forces that are reshaping the blue economy. What does this mean for each sector? So if we look at offshore oil and gas, as we saw, it looks to be remaining substantial, but there may be future constraints. And of course, there's always the discussion around natural gas and its transitionary role, and how that will likely, let's say, start overtaking more of the oil extraction offshore. We'll probably start seeing more natural gas come online, and a lot of the shipping that happens from offshore extraction will likely change from oil to natural gas. Offshore wind and marine renewables, there's lots of improvements constantly happening in storage, integrations, adding carbon capture, adding hydrogen, and electrolysis. So really that's moving forward across the globe. Coastal tourism. So we're seeing growing demand from emerging economies for global tourism. Like I said, just with how much of that is situated within the marine environments, we'll probably see a lot of that demand move into emerging, not just emerging, but into the marine areas of the world. Aging populations, when people retire, they want to travel. That's driving demand, and that'll move more and more people into tourism in marine and coastal areas. And then an interesting point around climate change here, it's likely to increase the tourist season in more, let's say, colder temperate regions of the world. So that does provide an opportunity for Canada. Obviously, there are some challenges with that as well, but we could see a growing tourist season in Canada with that. And Like I said, oil shipping likely go down, gas shipping likely go up globally. We're seeing increases in defense spending across the world, which will transform shipbuilding especially. And then there's a lot of regulatory pressure, especially in the developed world, for low and no emission ships, which is going to drive retrofitting or new shipbuilding. We're seeing increased demand for seafood as more and more people in the world enter the middle class. There is a larger desire for seafood. There's an old anecdote that you can tell when a neighborhood is gentrified when the first sushi joint opens up, which obviously drives seafood demand in those neighborhoods. So we're as more people enter that income bracket, we'll see more demand for seafood. But at the same time, with climate change, we're seeing stock declines, ocean acidification, lots of challenges to fish stocks, which is likely going to drive activity into the polar regions, which has obviously a lot of negative effects on those ecosystems. But with enhancements in digital monitoring, there is the opportunity to enhance governance globally. So as we have advancements in digitization, AI, and as those become cheaper and cheaper, governance theoretically could and should come easier. And then seabed mining. This is still heavily constrained by cost, environmental concern, a lack of a global and domestic regulatory regimes. There is obviously very high demand for the rare earth metals and the different nickel, cobalt, etc., that can be found in the ocean, but the deep sea mining we're not really seeing coming online yet, and there is some happening in more slightly offshore areas, but nothing significant because of these constraints. And then let's go into the Canadian context a little bit here. So I am sure that all of us on this call know that there's a massive opportunity here for Canada. You probably wouldn't be on this call if you didn't see that or know that or were interested in that. We have the longest coastline. We have a massive exclusive economic zone in the oceans. I believe it's around 5.75 million square kilometers. However, when we compare ourselves to our global competitors, our other OECD nations, we're really underdeveloped comparatively and in comparison to our global potential. So our national employment in the ocean sectors is 1.2% of all employment. Globally, you see numbers closer to 3.5 to 4.7% in 2023 numbers. And then in terms of GDP, in terms of the economy, it's similar, 1.2%. And globally, you see, especially in the OECD, numbers that are closer to 3 or 4%. So if we wanted to be anywhere close to our peer nations, we've got a lot of development to do. And so a lot of our challenge here as a nation is really to scale the innovations and technologies and opportunities that get us there while still maintaining our ecological and community integrity while we do that. A huge challenge, but also a massive opportunity for all of us. Let's talk a little bit about the sectoral variations that are happening here. So the blue economy is obviously uneven across regions and industries. And then uneven in terms of productivity and economic output versus employment. So really interesting stat here is that first number. Offshore oil and gas contributes 25% of our blue economy, or it makes up 25% of our blue economy in terms of GDP, but is only 1% of employment in the blue economy. So hugely productive and capital intensive sector. Or subsector. A quarter of output, but only 1% of employment. So that's quite a significant delta. Whereas tourism makes up 20%, but it's 43% of employment. So huge employment opportunities in tourism and recreation, makes up a significant amount of GDP. The public sector is 17%. We see similar levels of employment. Fishing 10%. These are organized by how big of an economic output they have. we go into marine transportation and support industries, then fish processing, fish and ship and boat building, ports and harbors, and aquaculture is quite tiny in Canada, makes up 1% of economic output and 1% of employment. So you can see there's a wide variation across industries and sectors and where employment lies versus the economic and productivity that is happening in those areas. And then if we look at the sectoral growth between 2019 and 2023, on the employment side, it was actually quite substantial, quite strong. You can see this is compounded annual growth between those years. And in Canada, our employment growth in these areas outperformed the overall economy. So in those years, the overall economy saw 1.3% CAGR in employment growth, whereas the blue economy actually saw a 5.3% growth rate. So quite a significant difference there. And there was a lot of seemingly port and harbor construction over that period. It drove a lot of that employment growth. Marine transportation and support for it, especially support for it. Tourism and recreation, we saw lots of employment growth, which is great to see in terms of a lot of this as pandemic years. Commercial fishing saw growth. Where we did see declines, two sectors saw declines in employment, fish processing and aquaculture. There was, I'm sure many of you on this call know, there was a lot of, let's just say, politics around these sectors in these years. So that's probably what drove some of this employment decline. But at the same time, aquaculture has also seen lots of advancements in technologies, in automation. We're especially seeing that in places like Norway. So part of this could also be driven by those technologies and automations coming online, which theoretically can reduce the amount of employment needed. However, if we do look at the compound annual rate of growth in economic output and GDP over those same years, we see a lot of the same patterns. There's a similar ranking here, almost the same ranking in terms of growth and declines. So in GDP growth, interestingly, even though the employment growth outperformed the employment growth in the total economy, that isn't true for GDP growth. GDP growth grew by 4.7% in these years in the blue economy compared to 5.7% in the economy overall. So lots of employment, but not as strong growth, which shows, some productivity lagging compared to the overall economy, let's say, in the blue economy. However, growth in employment and growth in GDP largely followed each other in terms of industry. And regional variations. So we looked at some of the sectoral variations there, but there are obviously also very many regional variations. So one of the interesting things here is that in terms of employment or share of employment in the blue economy, it's fairly even between the East and West Coast. It's slightly larger in the Atlantic. The Atlantic has almost 50% of employment in the blue economy. British Columbia has 46%. And in the Arctic regions in the north, in the territories, we see it's quite small. We're only at 0.7% of all blue economy jobs are in the north, compared to 46% in BC and almost 50% in the Atlantic. So yeah, or slightly over 50%, I should say. So there we see, quite levels that are fairly on par. In terms of GDP, though, British Columbia makes up, so the West makes up around 30% of economic output in the blue economy. The North makes up 1%, and the rest is made up in the Atlantic. So employment fairly even between East and West Coast. GDP larger in the Atlantic. The North, the opportunity in the North here is large. We would hope to see this grow over time, especially when we think about Arctic sovereignty. but also Indigenous-led environmental monitoring, Indigenous-led growth in these areas. Lots of opportunity there that we hope comes online. And there's also, if you look at these regional differences, there is potential for inter-regional collaboration. If we look at sort of the activity that's happening in the West Coast, a lot of it is around research capacity. You know, the universities across Canada are really developing a lot of research and development in this area, but a lot of technological growth in the West Coast. And the Atlantic, you could, I mean, there's lots of growth happening in the Atlantic, but you could say that is driven a little bit more by traditional industries. But because there is so much employment, because there is so much R&D capacity in the West, and as that part of the blue economy grows, there is the potential for workforce pipelines bidirectionally, but you can see, you know, research and innovation coming from, let's say, UVic and moving into traditional industries in the Atlantic. You can also see that vice versa from Dalhousie and Memorial into the West Coast. But I think we could all be served by growing these interregional collaborations. I know a lot of this is happening, but I think considering we still have a long ways to go to reach our international peers in our blue economy, we are a large geographically, you know, a nation that's very large geographically, but if we want to really reach our potential and reach our OECD peers in this sector, we probably want to see more interregional collaboration and movement of research pipeline, workforce pipelines, which is partly why we're doing this research that we are. And specialization is interesting. So this is based on these numbers, or this area here is based on a specialization score. So we essentially took these sectors and looked at how each province compares against each other in each of these sectors to find out which provinces lead in those areas relative to one another. So in terms of economic specialization in fishing, PEI is the most specialized in that area compared to all other provinces. For seafood preparation and packaging, it's Newfoundland and Labrador is the most specialized. For ship and boat building, it's Nova Scotia by a very wide margin. Nova Scotia is really of all the provinces, the leader in this area. For marine transportation, it's also Nova Scotia, and then for oil and gas extraction, it's, I think, maybe obvious that it's Newfoundland and Labrador. Again, this is compared to all other provinces. So obviously Nova Scotia or Newfoundland has marine transportation, BC has marine transportation, but if you look at the specialization of an industry compared to blue economy industries in all other provinces, these are the areas of specialization that we see. Okay, let's do a little case study here in Norway, of Norway. I think there's probably many of you on the call who work in the blue economy who maybe are tired of hearing how well Norway is doing. I know that in conversations around the blue economy, Norway constantly comes up over and over and over again. But it's really for good reason, as they by far have the largest blue economy of OECD nations. So of the 32 most economically developed nations in the world, Norway by far leads the pack. It makes up 20% of their overall GDP, which if you compare that to Canada's 1.2% is vastly different. And I think an important caveat always when comparing Canada and Norway that can sometimes get lost is that we have very different governance structures, which changes how we develop the blue economy. Norway is a unitary government, so really the federal government can make as many sort of decisions or impose as many decisions. Maybe impose is too strong of a word, but let's say they can really drive decision making in the regions in any way that they see as beneficial. The federal government in Canada doesn't necessarily have that same opportunity with Canadian federalism and the power of the provinces. So there are pros and cons to each system, but with Norway as a unitary government, they really don't have to have the same negotiations with provinces that Canada would have to develop their blue economy. They really can drive a lot of it at the federal level. But they, despite that caveat, they are an instructive model at the end of the day, considering how large the blue economy is there. A lot of this is driven by very early integrations with ocean industries, R&D, and higher education. There is a huge emphasis on connecting government, R&D, universities, and industry. And then not only developing it in Norway, but starting off with developing it in Norway, let's say technological innovations or R&D, and then really providing incentives to push those innovations that happen there throughout the world. So there's a big push and a big drive by the Norwegian government to send their companies abroad and really sell their products in ocean industries across the entire world. Canada is known to be a little bit more insular in that regard. There are great companies that are selling around the world. We struggle in a couple ways, not just in the ocean sector, but doing research and innovation and technology for 5 years. We sometimes struggle as a nation, one, to buy new technologies. We're a fairly risk-averse population. We're known for that globally. So we sometimes struggle to drive buying new innovations. We're great at developing them, not sometimes so great at integrating them. And at the same time, we don't always push our companies to compete globally. So those are sort of two cultural changes that we'll want to change to really drive our blue economy and get it up above 1.2%. Another thing Norway does really well is public-private coordination through their national ocean strategy. They put a lot of investment and a lot of emphasis on workforce transitions. They really ensure that oil and gas workers can shift towards renewables or can shift towards technological innovations, carbon capture, et cetera, in offshore extraction. They have a large sustainability drive in their aquaculture industry, which is quite large. Their government is also very explicit in their ambitions. Their goal, they repeat it often, is for Norway to continue to be the leading ocean economy. They have their policy documents consistently lay out sort of 6 opportunity areas to focus on, which is future-oriented ocean industries, education and skills, research and technology, sound management, and a predictable framework for industry so that industry knows the plan going forward and aren't caught off by surprise. Clean and healthy oceans driven by the SDGs. This is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then international cooperation and ocean diplomacy. And they've updated this recently to really say that their main drive going forward is going to be skills, digitalization, regional value creation, climate change mitigation, and green shipping. So that's really making up a major part of their ocean policy, and I think there's a lot to learn. I mean, we're doing a lot of this, but I think there is a lot to learn from Norway in growing our blue economy. And let's talk a little bit about our workforce. Let's kind of switch gears and talk about the Canadian workforce. Haley, I did have a poll here. I'm not sure if we can get this one online.
For sure.
Awesome. I hope you can all see that there. But, I'm interested to hear from folks on the call. We've been doing research in this area, and I think a lot of these could be the leader, but interested to hear from folks here on what they see as the biggest barrier to growing Canada's blue economy workforce. We've got lack of public awareness or career visibility, limited specialized training or education pathways, mismatch between industry needs and available skills, difficulty attracting young or diverse talent, or funding or investment constraints. We've got lots of numbers coming in here. It's a bit of a horse race, seeing constant shifting, which is great. No clear leader yet. Still got a couple numbers coming in here. And it looks like it's slowing down. It looks like mismatch between industry needs and available skills is the leader here, which is great because interestingly, that is what we're going to be talking about in this next section here. So let's start off by talking industry by industry in terms of workforce and what we're expected to see. So in marine and coastal tourism, as I showed before, it makes up 43% of employment in Canada's blue economy. So it's a major employer in the east and west coasts. The post-COVID recovery has been very strong in this area, which is great to see. There's a huge renewed interest both domestically and globally in Canadian ecotourism and in Canadian Indigenous-led tourism. Large trend towards sustainable tourism. Now that likely means there's less. Over time, we'll see less jobs linked towards mass tourism in Canada and more in small scale, Indigenous-led, community-led, and ecotourism. And with that, a side benefit is we'll see a greater demand in eco-friendly facility construction, eco-friendly facility maintenance, certified tour guides who have those niche specializations or the development of certifications for eco tour guide, let's say, and then a drive towards more community-based cultural experiences, especially for people who are coming to Canada across the globe. Something to note about tourism in Canada is it is quite expensive. Canada is compared globally, it's a fairly expensive country. We're also very large, so if somebody did want to come to Canada and see a lot of the nation, it is going to be quite an investment. So a lot of our specialization in tourism is also at that sort of high income level globally, which does provide an opportunity to really develop more niche tourism opportunities because they typically tend to be more expensive. And in the most recent data I've seen this might have changed actually slightly with the global trade war, but a lot of our tourism is driven by let's say wealthier Americans and wealthier Germans. In fishing, aquaculture, and fish processing, so likely still to see workforce development and growth in monitoring, enforcement, development, but obviously there are challenges in this area from climate change and pollution. One really interesting thing in this sector is that, I showed earlier that fish processing and aquaculture in terms of employment and GDP has gone down. So a lot of this is likely being driven by fishing in particular, but we're seeing employment demand grow in fishing in Canada. There's been steady growth since 2012 in this area, and there was a 2022 surge that has largely plateaued at that surge level, which is really interesting. This is also really, important to note that this is coming up in the data, considering that fishing is a very strongly driven by informal networks. So if we're seeing employment demand growing employment demand in the data, it likely means that it's even stronger considering how much informal hiring happens in this sector. But workforce renewal is going to be more and more of a concern as there is a lot of older workers in this sector. So there's an opportunity for mentoring, for training as more and more workers enter towards retirement years. And we also believe there's going to be emerging opportunities in value-added processing, in traceability technologies. A lot of this is being driven globally by places like Iceland and Norway. Canada, is there, but there's still large opportunities for us in that area. For maritime shipbuilding, the sector is shifting towards cleaner fuels, electrification. 50% of global orders are now actually specifying fuel flexible designs, so that's great to see. We've seen in Canada employment demand growing in this sector since 2020. It was largely, fairly plateaued for the decade before that, but consistent growth since 2020. And there's probably going to be more opportunities, as I said, growing in this area with the planned increases in defense spending. And with AI, or augmented reality and retrofitting, there's also a lot of opportunity in employment growth there. In offshore oil and gas, this is still a significant economic driver in Canada. Like I said, 25% of the economic output of Canada's blue economy, but we'll probably see the long-term output shaped by rising renewable investments, stricter climate policies, aging infrastructure. There was a significant amount of growth in this sector between 2022 and 2024. We're seeing that slow, and that's still a small number considering it's 1% of employment in the blue economy. Automation grows quite quickly in this sector, so we're probably seeing automation as a contributor in the plateauing or decline over the last year or two. And we'll probably see decommissioning and CCUS jobs grow over the next decade or two. Marine transport and ports. So a shift towards green shipping happening here, like I said, digitization, operating new ships, so skills around operating. Employment demand has grown over the last decade. It's plateaued a bit, but there's also been some very large pandemics or post-pandemic year spikes, 2022 and 2023. And the prediction here is that automation and digitalization can affect up to 66% of existing positions in this sector. So there'll be new opportunities in retrofits, green ports, green ships, new fuels, and those propulsion systems. But automation will likely, and we're seeing this in some areas, like in the Netherlands, there are some ports that are fully automated. There's no workers essentially, or workers are high-tech workers. That hasn't happened in Canada yet, but over the next 20 years, there is like say 20 to 30 years, there is a likelihood towards greater automation. In offshore and marine renewables, we're seeing a highly specialized workforce here that we need a highly specialized workforce. Demand has sharply risen. There's lots of job postings that have come online in the last year and a half. So we're seeing in job postings, growth in job postings, which likely means there's will be followed by a drive in economic growth. But there is some challenges that remain in this sector around public acceptance and NIMBYism, not in my backyard, changing ocean conditions and the need for regulatory harmonization across different government sectors or different government departments, I should say, and provinces and federal and territorial governments. In ocean technologies, marine biotechnology is growing very rapidly. Expectations of compound annual growth rate of 15% up to 2027. Restoration and protection is driving ocean data and monitoring. We're seeing large opportunities growing for roles like bioprocessing engineers, marine researchers, bioinformaticians, oceanographers. So lots of opportunity coming online here. But let's talk a little bit about pathways. So the blue economy, interestingly, so that was what we see in each sector by sector. Looking at the blue economy overall, it's not, it makes up 5% of occupations, but there is a large opportunity here or I should say a modest but very important opportunity here for people who work in what we call HRLM occupations. So that means high risk, low mobility. So those are occupations in Canada that have a high risk of being automated away, but don't have a lot of options, let's say, for transitions or movement into other occupations without some training. But for Canada, we do see that, so for HRLM occupations, there is a higher proficiency required in the blue economy compared to HRLM occupations, which isn't surprising considering the low mobility aspect of them. But the most significant skills gaps are in finance, leadership, business administration, and STEM. So if we did want to transition workers who don't have a lot of opportunities but are at high risk of automation, we would want to see training in those areas as the likely highest impact areas. And blue economy occupations also require higher cognitive and perceptual abilities. But interestingly, HRLM workers usually have superior physical and manual capabilities. So there would be an easier time, let's say, shifting somebody from a highly manual or physical HRLM occupation into a physical or manual blue economy occupation that is at less risk of automation. So that's another area of opportunity for transitioning workers, is in finance, leadership, or let's just say business skills, STEM skills, and lower risk of automation physical jobs. And one really interesting thing here is that blue economy occupations provide a very significant increase in wages compared to HRLM occupations. So this is why we think that there is a justification for heavy investment in moving HRLM workers into the blue economy, is because we could see even at overall workers could have an increase in $15,000 to $20,000 more in wages annually through those transitions. But then with experience, that potential for wage increases becomes more and more significant. So workers with 10 plus years experience could see premiums of $30,000 to $60,000 by moving into the blue economy. And wage premiums are strongest in British Columbia. So again, maybe an area to specialize in transitioning workers, because there is the bigger payoff in investment in that region, as well as the north. And if we look at, so that was HRLM. If we look at the green economy, there is a lot of alignment. So 75% of all skills are at least somewhat aligned, or have no gaps, let's say, between the blue and the green economy. So there is the potential for a lot of transitions back and forth, blue economy and green economy workers, without needing much training or having a little bit of training or domain-specific training. Green economy skills have a higher proficiency in complex cognitive activities, but lower competencies in physical characteristics and technical areas such as logistics and accounting compared to the blue economy. And then let's move in. I know we're coming up to time here. Let's just talk a little bit about Canada's blue economy future. So some strategic sectors. This is from Canada's Ocean Supercluster. This is where we see a lot of opportunity where we agree where there is a lot of opportunity here for the future. Energy is expected to grow. Seafood expected to grow, but we did see those GDP and employment declines over 2019 to 2023, maybe pandemic driven, maybe politics driven, but there is a desire for growth here. Ocean tech, lots of opportunity, as I said, same in marine transport and tourism. So this is where we're likely to see growth and where there is opportunity in Canada. But we want to make sure that this growth is aligned with regional and sectoral specializations. So we want to see investments in regional specializations, those ones that I mentioned earlier. So Newfoundland and Labrador, energy investment, Nova Scotia, shipbuilding and transport investment, PEI, opportunity for fisheries investment, so that we can really focus in on the areas that those provinces really can drive growth because they have that specialization as compared to other provinces. It really creates a strong cluster when we align investment with specialization. We really want to see more research, though, on productivity and infrastructure readiness so we can guide those policies and make sure that those investments are aligned with both economic and environmental impact. In addressing our labor shortages, there's been research that we have over 8,000 additional marine workers needed in the next 5 years, but a lot of those positions are in navigation engineering and crew roles, which are highly regulated. They're training intensive, so they will likely need significant investments. Offshore wind there's lots of, Nova Scotia in particular really wants to drive growth in this area, could create up to 11,000 new jobs. And then there's a lot of opportunity, and we want to see, and we are seeing growth in inclusive and Indigenous focused programs. So to meet our future workforce needs, we want to continue expanding programs in ocean sciences, engineering, IT management. We're seeing opportunities in energy, biotech, and marine finance, so investment there is great. And then, like I said, with Norway really leading the pack in that collaboration between academia, industry, and government, we have a lot to learn there. And then there's opportunity as well for more advanced technical and leadership programs, so we can hit that 8,000 new workers, those 11,000 new workers in offshore wind. So we could see things like blue MBAs, or more and more training programs come online that would benefit and make sure we hit those numbers and get past 1.2%, of our GDP being the blue economy. And then to more on our future, to expand and accelerate access. Let's continue research to identify barriers into the blue economy. We're doing some of that with Eco Canada next, but make sure that training is accessible. We want to expand the reach of the blue economy more inland. There's lots of workers, especially high-tech workers in Ontario, in Alberta. Let's show the pathways that exist to the coasts, or expand opportunities from the coast into the inland, so that Canadians see the marine opportunity that exists. And then let's just really make sure that training is aligned to long-term sustainability and emerging job needs. And a lot of that is going to be driven by companies like us at the Ottawa Education Group, but also by government grant programs, government opportunities like the Canada-Ontario Jobs Grant that exist but we want to, or the Canada Jobs Grants that exist across the province. But let's make sure those opportunities are highlighted in our networks so that we can continue to grow employment. And that's all going to help us build a sustainable and inclusive ocean workforce. So investing now will help our future competitiveness as that competition grows across the globe, and improve our resilience and improve our ocean stewardship. So that takes us to the end there. I'm sorry that last little bit was a little rushed, but we've got a minute here. I can stay on a couple minutes longer if anyone else can, but are there any questions?
Thanks so much, Dan. That was great. And for all of you watching, I'm going to put the full research report in the chat right now, so you'll be able to review that yourself and learn more and deeper about what Dan was covering here today. We do have a few questions. So first one is, how much is the contribution of the blue economy in the national GDP of Canada per year, and where to act strategically to increase that percentage?
Yeah, no, great question. So per year, I don't have the I don't have the year by year data in front of me, but like I said, it has grown globally. Well, it's doubled globally from 1995 to today, and it's expected to double again globally from 2025 to 2050. And we have seen, I do have, so 1.2% overall right now. And between 2019 and 2023, it was 4.7% annually. So again, lagged the national economy, but how do we make up for that delta? I think it's really around some of that stuff we talked about at the end here, focusing in on these sectors, and then I do in innovation and technology research. I think, like I said, with Norway, unitary government becomes a bit of a challenge in Canada because our federalist nature. There's a lot of politics that has to likely happen for this, but aligning our investments with regional specializations to truly create clusters at a very small scale level. There is a lot of innovation research that shows that highly regionalized specialization, it creates outsized economic opportunity. So focusing in on which regions really can lead the way in certain areas, and really pumping investments down to the ground in those areas, because then you get grassroots growth, you get network effects. There's a lot of sort of secondary benefits that happen from really aligning investments to where specializations are on the ground. I hope that helps answer that question.
Thank you. Next question, what economic opportunities exist for emerging markets to export sustainable ocean products or marine services to Canada?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we really focused in on Canada on a lot of our research, or Canada and the OECD, I should say. So we focused more on the global north and developed economies in a lot of this research. I do think that there are opportunities, though. I mean, like I kind of said earlier, there is a lot of desire for offshore development. in oil and gas and natural gas in developing economies, rightly or wrongly, let's say. But there is Guyana shows that there is economic opportunity there that likely leads to knock-on effects around technologies. I would hope that developing economies are focusing on trying to make that extraction as clean as possible and homegrown technological advancement in that area that can then be exported. But I mean, if you look at places like Southeast Asia, there's huge amounts of sort of integrated aquaculture. So, you know, aquaculture that is that sort of has knock-on effects like combining oysters with fish so that there's filtration, and then you can, you know, sell oysters alongside fish. So a lot of products are integrated and co-beneficial. So as those technologies develop in the developing world, hopefully those can be exported. So there's probably opportunity there. But beyond that, because I've focused a lot of my research over the last 5 years in the global north, so I'm sorry I don't have more to dictate on that.
Thanks, Dan. Last question. Someone says, I see a lot of opportunities with technical growth, but what about the policy, advocacy, and conservation sectors? With growth in these sectors, we need growth in ocean literacy and community outreach as well. Do you anticipate growth in those areas as well? Because Canada is way behind places in the EU in the NGO sector and environmental and marine conservation work.
100%. That is a great question. Very important point. So Canada, I think, well, I mean, this is in the data. We used to see ourselves as more of a maritime nation than we do today, which I think ties into that ocean literacy point. If you look at surveys that have been done on sort of where in the country people see ourselves as a maritime nation, a lot of it is situated in the coasts, but surprisingly not always or everywhere along the Atlantic and Pacific in Canada. Surprisingly, in the prairies, a lot of people, there's a high percentage of people who see ourselves as a maritime nation. That's largely attributed to the fact that so much product from the prairies, whether grain or oil and gas, is shipped internationally. So there's a direct tie between economic output and where it's going in the world that drives our perception as a maritime nation, and which in turn, I think, would likely drive ocean literacy, or a desire at least for ocean literacy. I think where there's opportunity is driving that perception of ourselves. I don't think that requires substantial investment. I think there are low-cost ways of doing that, whether it's adding it more into our curriculums. But I think where we also struggle is seeing ourselves or seeing the opportunities that exist for entrepreneurialism in the ocean sector. I mean, you mentioned government, and I think there's a huge role for government policy driving some of this. But really where we lag in a lot of areas is seeing ourselves as an entrepreneurial nation as well. And there's so much entrepreneurial opportunity in the ocean sector, in those technologies, and exporting those technologies around the world. So the more we can drive policy, policy investments and prescriptions towards growing those technologies and sending them around the world, I think the better off we'll grow as an ocean nation.
Thanks so much, Dan. This was a great presentation. Make sure you check out the link that I put in the chat to get the full research report. You can check that out. And also, if you have any questions or are interested in learning more about the designations available for Canada's Blue Economy workers, check out our next Blue Economy themed webinar. I just put the link in the chat for that as well. It's on November 13th at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Go ahead and register for that. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Dan, again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.